Hey there, welcome to Oh Happy Plants. Today I got a really great question within the member community, and I'm going to go ahead and do a quick little Q&A because we are coming into the winter season and it's time to take all of this into account. So one quick little mention is if you're watching this on YouTube, I keep forgetting to mention this. If you're watching this on YouTube, go ahead over to our member community. It's at members.ohhappyplants.online. And you're going to find a whole community over there where we're just getting going, but as of, what is it, September 2020? Sorry, I forget what day it is, what year it is sometimes. Anyway, we're just getting going, and we are trying to build a really great repository to really promote the idea of adaptive plant care. And the whole idea is that we adapt what we do to what the plant needs instead of trying to force the plant into like square peg in a round hole. So that means that every time we move the plant around our house, we're going to watch it for changes in its needs, because then we're going to adapt our care to that instead of just like continuing to water every single week if we move a plant from a bright window to a dark corner. That's just not going to work. It'll eventually kill it, you know? So anyway, that's what we're doing. And you're going to find a great place to ask all your questions, and I'm going to pop in with little Q&A videos like this one to try to answer those, especially if it's a question that a lot of people can use the answer to, then we'll create a video with it. So Nora asks, many of my plants do not transition well at the beginning of winter. Many plant leaves here Many plant leaves have trouble unfurling, develop damage, or don't open properly. What are some ways to avoid this and support my plants so less damage occurs? And that is a really great question, and there are several potential causes. Like with everything, you know, you go to the doctor and they give you 3 diagnoses and they just start trying things. Try option A just to see if it fixes it. Try option B, you know, if that doesn't work, try option C. So that's what we're going to do today. There's not really often just like one answer to things. And so the number one thing that I would probably start with addressing is the heat. And so how things work, like, oh, can't put my hand there because it makes everything weird. I'm sorry, it's very sunny and bright and my plants love it, and it's probably hard to see right now. But once again, if I didn't sit down right now and do this, I wouldn't get it done. So heat with plants and photosynthesis. Heat signals to plants that there's more light, because in nature outside, heat comes from the sun, which also provides light. So in the summertime, when the sun is more intense, it's hotter, they have more light that sparks more photosynthesis. Hopefully they have enough water to complete the whole process. And so all of that kind of works hand in hand. So just like when you walk into a restaurant and you smell amazing food and it's like your favorite restaurant and you get really hungry, that's the same sort of thing. When it gets hot outside, plants are like, oh, we better start growing because it's summer. So like now is the time. Especially plants in the northern latitudes and really southern latitudes, plants that really experience a lot of seasonal change, they're going to be really trying to grow when it's warm outside. And so that's one of the reasons that we notice the growth period in summer. A piece of it is because the light kicks up. That's what sparks it in the spring. But another big piece is the heat in the summer. That's why we see that massive growth. And so if the heat suddenly drops, if the temperature in your home drops and you haven't turned on your heaters yet, and you notice that all of a sudden the growth is slowing down, that's a reason to address right there. Maybe turn your heaters on a little bit sooner, and there's one issue that can come from that if you already have. You could work to just like keep the area that the plants are in. Like over here, I keep my blinds open, and that keeps the sun shining in. It also keeps the heat a little bit, the temperature a little warmer in this corner. And I don't like to let my house get below 60, but even 60 degrees when they're used to 70 or 80, 60 degrees is going to be quite the shock for them. And so that's the number one thing that I would address. I think that probably they're slowing their growth, which means that they formed this leaf. Like remember that leaves, like especially like monsteras, philodendrons, they take a long time to form within the sheath, and then they come out and they're still growing and growing and growing until they pop open and start unfurling, and then even then they keep growing. But that popping open is triggered by a certain amount of growth already. Like maybe that leaf has been growing for a month or two, but maybe a month of that was like kind of like under the surface growth that you didn't even notice until it popped its little tip out. And so with that, if all of that is triggered when it's warm and then all of a sudden it gets really cool, you're going to notice some slowing in the growth, and then that leaf may stay curled up for a lot longer than it has over the summer just because the growth has slowed. And also, like, if the weather, like around here, I'm in the Pacific Northwest in Washington State in the US, and around here we get a pretty stark transition to the rainy season, and or at least we used to. I don't know, it feels like second summer right now, but we did have a couple weeks where it was rainy, and so that by itself, like all of a sudden the light has decreased and the heat has decreased, and I even turned my heater on in the house because I was cold. And so those two things can signal to the plants like, oh, the growing season is over, and then they might give up on those new leaves a little bit, or just really not prioritize that because all of a sudden they're kind of ramping things down, hibernating, you know, snuggling up for winter because they know that they can't continue with that intense growth because it's not supported by the amount of light outside. So anyway, that's one thing that you can address is heat. And hand in hand with that is humidity. Humidity can cause a plant to not unfurl properly. And the way I interpret this, and I don't have any research or scientific backing to this, but what it seems like is happening to me is that the plant, like the tissues aren't as flexible when it's dry. You know, like just how your skin, if your lips get dry, they get cracked. They're not flexible anymore. They can't, you just can't talk as much if you're really dehydrated. Anything like leather that's really dried out will crack. And I'd imagine that plant leaves would be similar, where if they're really just not, sorry, I'm touching my Rojo Congo over here, he's keeping me company. Plant leaves, if they're not getting enough moisture, and if they're in an environment where they're just actively losing more and more moisture to the air when they open their stomata, then they are going to be less flexible. That's just kind of what my brain is putting together as a potential cause for that. I always want to know why. I don't know if you're the same way, but that's the way my brain works. I always want to assign a meaning to something. And so the humidity thing, that is a real issue. And with plants, I like to just group them. I'm going to turn my camera over here. I have this kind of collection of different plants behind my chair here. I've got more up there. I've got more over on this side, like a couple over here. And I group them like that, especially large plants all together, because I know that they will all do that thing where they open their stomata and I'm trying to keep my hand out of the really bright light so you can see me gesture, but maybe I just won't. They open their stomata up and they lose moisture through the stomata. Some of that is kind of intentional because they don't need all of that. Some of it is just like when I'm talking, I'm losing moisture through my mouth. It just naturally evaporates. And so that can actually raise the relative humidity in this whole little corner. So like once in a while I'll notice my windows back here are fogging up because the humidity is raised so much by these plants back here. But whereas like the window over there doesn't fog up at all because there aren't a bunch of plants around it. And the only reason for that is because it's on my door. Can't really put a million plants right in front of your door. I mean, I probably have at some point, but you know. Anyway, so humidity can be a real issue. If you want to have like a statement plant that is just all by itself, that is not clustered with a bunch of other plants, then I would recommend a humidifier. The coolest little humidifiers that I have seen are just these little things that you set in a bowl of water. They're called donut humidifiers, and if you go to sendnodesplantshop.com. I know Brielle has quite a few on her website. It's SENDNODES plantshop.com. And just like if you want to support another small business, she's out in Bremerton, Washington, I believe. And she's actually a delivery-based plant shop, but I don't know if she's shipping yet, but she's fabulous, so definitely support her. Those little donut humidifiers, though, you just set it in a bowl of water, and it just makes this little, like, constant stream of humidity, and it's just a really cool little idea, and they're pretty inexpensive. It's not like a giant tank that you fill, it's just you set it in a bowl of water. So, like, if you had like a bowl of water that was like maybe even your pebble tray or something like that, you could do a pebble tray plus one or two of those little donuts, and that could raise the humidity for that little guy. They're so small, and that's why I don't like the standard humidifier look, is because unless you're hiding it behind a bunch of your plants, it's this big ugly appliance in the middle of everything, and I'm just not a fan. But that's me. So do whatever you want. Humidity might be a factor. The other thing that might be a factor is because the growth slows, and so especially with our aroid friends, the ones that do the process of guttation, which is when a plant gets a little bit too much water in the soil, or not even too much, just when it is watered, sometimes it takes up a little bit too much water, even if the soil moisture is fine and that's just normal. Sometimes just to get rid of the water so it doesn't sit in the tissues and so it doesn't cause edema like we find in the fiddle leaf fig, those little red speckles that you'll see, is because so much water is sucked up, and in the new tissue those little cells are weak, and so they'll actually burst and die, and that's the dead cells that you're seeing, that red speckling on the back of a fiddle leaf fig leaf when they're a baby. So instead of doing that, what our aroid friends will do is they will actually do this thing called guttation, where they have all of that water up in their tissue, and it actually forces it out through these specialized little cell things, openings. I forget what they're called. I'm going to find that because now it's going to bother me. But anyway, they force that water out. And so if you have, like, say, a monstera that has a new leaf that is having a hard time unfurling, or just all of a sudden the growth slows because it's winter, then that new leaf may start gutating, which is forcing that water out. And if it's doing that while it's all tightly wound up, sometimes that can lead to fungal issues within the tissue, and then the leaf will open up, and you're going to see like either black splotches, or, you know, depending on which type of fungus may have been present in that plant's tissue. And that can lead to some problems too. And there's not really anything a person can do about that other than correcting the root cause of this, which is the heat and the humidity potentially being issues. And it really, I do believe that it's a heat and light thing. You know, if the season is changing, the plant just slows its growth, so you may just lose a few leaves at the end of the season, or you might want to turn your heat up in your house as soon as it starts getting cooler outside, and put a grow light on the plant. One thing you could do, if there's a grow light that actually emits a little bit of heat, you might look into that. I know that mine, they don't warm up a whole lot, but it probably raises the temperature right around those plants a few degrees, which is fine, you know, for most plants, because it's not like I live in a super hot environment. My partner probably would tell you that it's not fine in the summertime. He runs too warm, and so we keep the air conditioning on all the time. But I'm sure those plants love having a little bit of a lamp that warms them up. But anyways, you might look into a grow light that actually does provide a little bit of heat, not a proper heat lamp because that can just cook them, but a grow light that warms up just a little bit, just to provide a little bit of extra oomph, and especially if it has the gooseneck arms, so it can kind of like stretch around and be focused really well on one area. You might focus it on that unfurling leaf just to give it a little extra kick so it can keep going. One other thing, hate to say this, but pests. So spider mites and other mites on new growth, often they'll go straight to the new growth, and I know mealybug will focus on new growth. And a reason that pests like new growth is because it's really soft tissue. The plant hasn't had enough time to really build those cell walls up. As plants mature, they put more and more, like silica is one of the main ingredients in cell wall structure, and cellulose, obviously, you know, carbon, sugar. So they put more and more into that leaf, and that's why plant leaves harden as they age. And so of course, like, why do we like baby lettuce? It's because it's so soft and delicious, right? bugs like that too. So you might see pests on your leaves that are having a hard time unfurling. I've noticed that they don't necessarily, sometimes they'll get a little bit stuck, but really what you're going to notice, especially with mites, is the leaf will come out and unfurl and be either small and stunted or just like weirdly wrinkled or just malformed. And that is a pretty clear sign of pests. Sometimes that can be a nutrient deficiency, but definitely I would, like, before even looking for pests, because some of these mites are too small for us to really see, I would just go ahead and treat one of those guys. And we do have a whole, we have 2 videos on mites, one on broad mites and cyclamen mites and one on spider mites. And so, like I said, there are different types of mites. Some do not produce any kind of webbing, so looking for that and assuming you don't have mites because you don't find webbing is not really going to help you out. So if you are seeing any kind of like serious malformed leaf, curled, twisted, weird shaped, super small, definitely look for some kind of pest. And mealybug is another one that really attacks new leaves. I haven't really seen them cause super malformed leaves come out often, but I have seen it happen once or twice. So anyway, those are just a couple of things to look for, and I hope you're enjoying, if you're in this area, I hope you're enjoying the sunshine we're getting. It's like we have a second little bit of a summer. It's getting a little crisp out there, though. It's definitely soup season, so definitely take care of your plants. Pay attention to them drinking a little bit less water lately. Pay attention to where your heaters are, and if you're having this issue with leaves unfurling, try a couple of these tips just to see if you can fix it. Thanks, guys. Have a great day.